Welcome back to the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Madisonville Marine. Summer is almost here, folks, and people will be hitting area lakes. When you look around and see all of those people out there having fun, you're going to want a boat of your own. Turn to Madisonville Marine. No one has a bigger, better selection of makes and models than Madisonville Marine. There's no better place to buy a boat. I say it every week. It's true every week. Madisonville Marine. All right, take a look at this ski slope. What this is, and by the way, I forgot to change that top line. It says 28 classes, 1990 to 2020. Actually, I updated it. It's 29 classes from 1990 to 2021. If you're reading the stock market, you'd go crazy if you just look at it up and down each day. What you do is you look at the trends. So that's what we've done here. Every year we look at a 4-year class. Okay, so how many draft picks go from Tennessee to the NFL? And we're just looking first 7 rounds, because you go back far enough, you had more than 7 rounds. And I don't want that to skew the results. So we just look first 7 rounds. How many guys went in a 4-year span? So you had 17 drafted from 90 to 93, 18 from 91 to 94, etc. You see it go way up until you get to about the national championship, and the guys that were here and then left after that title, 32 players picked from 2000 to 2003. Then you see the ski slope down. You had the steady climb and then just a rapid descent. You fire Philip Fulmer, it drops further. Between 2013 and 2016, you were down to just 7 players. You had a little spike there, 2015, 2018, 2017, 2020. So you had some of those Butch Jones guys that came in and wound up in the league, and now you're back down to 7. In terms of a 3-decade view, that's the lowest you've been in terms of producing NFL talent. The question is, how long will it be to turn that around? Are there guys on this roster that you would look at for next year and say, oh, he'll be drafted next year?
No.
I mean, you look at some guys who have to.
If you look at this roster right now, if you're looking at next year's draft,
Cade Mays, if he leaves early, would probably be drafted somewhere.
And boy, after that, you start going, well, maybe if he has a good year. But I mean, a lot of the guys drafted in the first round, they've already got the first mock drafts out for next year. Mm-hmm. The way too early. Tennessee doesn't show up anywhere. Not first, second, third, fourth. I mean, you're talking about. I don't see any Tennessee guys down until I do think it was Cade Mays, and he was a 4th rounder, if I'm not mistaken.
A crazy thing, a year ago, there were mock drafts that had Cade going potentially first round in this year's draft.
Yeah, with Trey Smith.
Here we are with Trey Smith. Here we are with this conversation now.
For an entire season.
Yeah.
Maybe he develops into that, but
and he was the obvious first name.
He was another guy though that was, the hype train gets out of control on some of these guys, and he was one of the we're getting a 5-star coming back from Georgia where he started every game. And no, he didn't. I mean, he may at Tennessee eventually, but that wasn't what he was at Georgia. After Cade Mays, I think Bob's right. You're looking at guys like, well, with the new offense, does Velus Jones play himself into a position?
Yep.
The way they were actually using the tight ends, does a guy like Princeton Fant, when they take a lot of tight ends late in these drafts that are just throw a dart at a guy. If he has 25 catches next year, does he make somebody's 7th round pick? But that's kind of what you're looking at. There aren't a lot of guys. They bragged on Elijah Simmons this spring. All right, he will have been here 3 years. He could leave if he has some fantastic year. But you're talking about long shots.
Yeah, I wonder in the secondary, could somebody like Alontae Taylor, good athlete, well-respected, Trayvon Flowers, good athlete, if he can make a jump with Willie Martinez and Tim Banks. But they're still on the list of players of, well, if these things happen.
Right.
It's not a long list.
Well, put it this way. With probably the exception of Cade Mays, none of these guys you're talking about first or probably second-day guys, with the exception of Cade Mays. So even if the other guys do develop, unless somebody does just jump off the charts, you're still talking about, well, if I want to watch Vols drafted, I'll tune in Saturday.
Right, we're talking be drafted, not be drafted day one.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I like to do the 4-year, because it gives you a better trend of what's going on. Because there have been times where Tennessee had guys come back when they could have gone. So if you just look at it year to year, you'd say, oh, they didn't have anybody drafted. Yeah, but they had 9 drafted the next year. So that because guys came back. Florida had that a few years ago where they had one guy go. And it's like, wow, they were a great team. Yeah, well, they had 11 guys go the next year because everybody had come back. That's not the case with Tennessee. You didn't have a lot of guys come back who passed on being drafted this year. Vince, who do you see on Tennessee's roster that you say, well, he's somebody to look at for next year?
Well, you can have the 1 year jump and 1 year
Yeah.
of productivity for the NFL. It has happened. And of course, it'll make them wonder, or why didn't you do it 2 years ago? Scheme change, coaches, whatever. So it is possible, but it has to be a guy that maybe explodes that we've never seen anything from. Maybe like an Elijah Simmons, perhaps. I mean, he was raved about in spring. We'll see. We're a long way from that because we haven't seen it in games. You know, Cedric Tillman, perhaps. He has a nice body, and he's made some great catches. Maybe he makes that Josh Palmer type of jump to kind of get in the mix. They would have had Eric Gray on that list. He probably would have been at or near the top had he stayed, but he's obviously not on this team. And that the transfer portal and the way the roster looks right now, it's hard to find those guys because they just haven't done it so far.
Okay.
Fans would love to hear Hendon Hooker could be that kind of guy.
Right.
I mean, he's a player that, but it would be that. It would be making a jump to be
Yeah, and
that
based
kind
on
of
what we saw at Virginia Tech, that's not the.
Yeah, the hope fans would have would be, well, if he is the guy, then he'd be in Josh Heupel's offense. He'd put up the numbers in the SEC, and that would get him an NFL
You also have the
opportunity.
JUCO running back, Evans.
Yeah, Tyon Evans.
You know, okay, is he a guy that comes in here? He's just about the top-rated player you had left that just came in. Maybe he comes in and does something and leaves because he'd be eligible to go.
A couple of notes before we go further that I meant to say earlier. Well, first, Vince had a point that he made. It was wrong, but he made a point. We were off air. I said earlier that the first offensive lineman from Tennessee drafted since 2014. He is correct in pointing out that Khalil McKenzie wound up playing offensive. He was drafted to play offensive line with Kansas City, but he wasn't a Tennessee offensive lineman. He never played at O-line at Tennessee. So you're right, but you're wrong.
I was trying to save you the tweets. So.
Yeah, thank you. And then the other note I was going to make was, and I meant to say this early in the show, but it works with the draft chart you just saw. 4 of the first 97 picks in this year's draft were from the state of Tennessee. None wound up signing with Tennessee.
Wow.
Not a good. That's
Mr.
something-
Negative.
Yeah, that's right. I'm just trying to look for the negative. All right, when we come back, Josh Heupel. Well, here I'm going to be positive, maybe. Josh Heupel had a bunch of guys drafted at UCF. Does that give anybody encouragement? Especially, we'll talk about Willie Martinez, what he did with his defensive backs at UCF. Another reason Bryce Thompson might have been good to come back. What is it? Does it bode well for Alontae Taylor? We'll discuss. Come on back on the Sports Source.